Today is the day that I learn how to free motion quilt on my domestic sewing machine, and I thought I'd bring you along with me so that I can share with you the process for how I get started and my key learnings along the way. Hello friends, welcome back to Karla Created, or welcome if you're new here. My name is of course Karla, and if you like quilting and sewing, then perhaps you should stick around because so do I. And today is the day that I am going to start free motion quilting for the very first time. I'm so excited. I have wanted to start free motion quilting on my domestic sewing machine for so long. Now, if you are a complete novice when it comes to free motion quilting like I am, there's a few things that you need to first be aware of. Free motion quilting on a domestic machine is very different to free motion quilting on a quilting machine because obviously you are constrained by the size and the throat space of your domestic machine, and you also need to move the fabric with your hands rather than moving around the arms of the quilting machine. I'm probably using all of the incorrect language, but bear with me. I'm a novice, you're a novice probably. If you're not a novice and you're watching this, please chime in the comments with some tips, the proper words and terminology. Help everybody out. That would be so amazing. Thank you. And if you are a complete beginner when it comes to quilting, when we talk about quilting, what we're actually referring to is attaching the 3 layers of a quilt, which is your quilt top, the wadding or batting in the middle, and the backing piece, which is your sandwich. You're sewing them all together essentially. That is what we mean when we say quilting. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's get to the first thing that you need to get started. Now, I have done a little bit of research on this, and I think there's a few different camps. There's the people who say that you can use your existing presser foot, whether that be a walking foot, which is what I have got on my machine right now, or just a normal everyday sewing machine foot. There are also people who say that you need a darning foot or an open toe foot for your machine, which is actually what I went and purchased at the Craft Alive quilt show or quilt expo that I went to back in August. You buy this specific to your machine, and essentially this is called a darning foot, and it has an open toe, so then you can actually see a little bit more easily where your stitches are going. So I've got myself one of those. You'll also see that it has a spring here, and apparently this is because it allows a bit more movement up and down and the bounciness or something. We've got one of those. Now, the next thing that you need to do to prepare before you get started is become familiar with where your button is or mechanism is on your sewing machine to bring your feed dogs down. Now, the feed dogs are the funny little spikes that stick up underneath your presser foot, and they actually move when you're sewing, and they help the fabric go through underneath the needle of the machine. You don't want this with free motion quilting, so you need to turn those off. And for me, it's this button here on the side that we push in, and then you know that they're down because the button on my particular machine, which is a Benina, stays pushed inwards. So it means now that there's no assisted movement from those feed dogs, so you actually are controlling the fabric moving through the machine yourself. If your machine doesn't allow you to lower the feed dogs, then apparently you can get a feed dogs cover plate, which then stops them from making contact with your fabric. I'm not familiar with those. You'd have to obviously look into that if it's relevant for your particular sewing machine. I'm pretty sure most sewing machines would actually have a mechanism to lower the feed dogs. So if you're like me at this point, you're probably thinking, that was really easy, of course, like so straightforward. How hard can this be? I think it's a little bit trickier than what I personally have gone into it thinking. And I know this because there's a few other things that I've learned just from having a crack today at a test sample. Yes, a very large test sample. So the first thing that I realized when I decided to just wing it and have a go with my feed dogs down and my darning foot in is that I needed to make sure that I was using the right needle, which I don't think I was. I think the needle that I was using was perhaps a little bit too thick for the fabric that I have got here. I also realized that I didn't have the thread stitch length set correctly. I actually set it far too long and it is incredibly uneven. These two things are the next important factors for you to consider, which I also did not realize until I did this tester piece and then I did some more research. You need to have an appropriate needle, first of all. So I have now changed out to a 90 by 14 sewing machine needle. You can also use an 80 by 12. It is an 80 by 12 sewing machine needle. Once again, this is one of those situations where people have said to me that it doesn't matter what needle you use. You can use any universal needle, which is what I had in earlier, and it wasn't quite right. But then also there's a camp that says use a specific quilting needle, which is the 80 by 12 or 90 by 14s. So I've gone and bought an extra packet of these in the case of me snapping a needle, which happens sometimes. And I'm almost out of those two sizes, so I thought I better buy another packet. Now, the other thing that I mentioned was around stitch length. And once again, there's obviously different ways and people that believe different things when it comes to the appropriate stitch length. And I think it comes down to your personal preference with what you want the stitches to look like. There's also a relationship between the stitch length, the speed at which you are moving the fabric around, and the speed of which you are pressing down on the presser foot. So those three things work in conjunction together, and I didn't quite realize that when I was having a go doing my tester piece. So my stitch lengths on this piece are all over the place. They are incredibly haphazard, and then I also believe there may be an issue with the tension. The other thing that I stumbled across when I was doing some research was around the type of thread that you use. I was under the impression that it didn't matter, but I think there is some difference between whether you use polyester thread or cotton thread. Some quilters say that polyester thread over time can actually cause damage to the cotton fabric, and I don't know the truth to that, so I've just stuck with the cotton thread for now. It is also recommended that you use a thread color that blends into the fabric when you're first starting out. I kind of chose to do that with this one. This is just like a scrappy thing that I put together with a bunch of scraps that I had in my stash. And yeah, so I wasn't too fazed about how it would look. The other suggestion that I found is to use a matching thread for the bobbin as well as the top thread. I didn't do that in this instance, and because I had the tension slightly amiss, you can see some of the white bobbin thread peeking through the top of the fabric. So that's something that I need to keep in mind as well. And now you're probably wondering why I'm just sharing all of this and not actually doing any quilting yet. And that is because I'm sharing my learnings so far from doing this sample piece prior to getting into the quilt project that I want to free motion quilt. This is the quilt that I want to do free motion quilting on. If you've watched any of my other videos, this might look a little bit familiar. And when I made it a little bit too small. So I've added like a cool border here just to make it a bit bigger. And now it is a perfect size for a lap quilt. I've got the quilt sandwich ready. I've just used pins to keep the sandwich together. However, you can use basting spray, which apparently is a little bit more effective at keeping your sandwich together flat, especially when you are learning to free motion quilt. I've not done that because I don't have any basting spray and I don't want to go buy any. So I've just pinned it quite thoroughly. And one final thing that I've learned from the sample was that the backing fabric really does need to be a smooth cotton. Thus far in my quilting journey, I have been using all sorts of different fabrics. I've not been sticking to the traditional quilting cotton because I really didn't, see the reason to. However, now that I've had a crack at free motion quilting, it is more apparent why quilting cotton is most commonly used when making quilts. And that is because on the front, I use this like looser weave sort of cotton here, which is actually like a curtainy type fabric. And my darning foot kept getting caught in the weave of the fabric. So there was that issue. Now, I also really struggled to move the fabric around on my the base of the machine because I backed this with a flannel. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you're gonna have a crack at free motion quilting and you want to put flannel on the back, it's going to be kind of difficult to move it around. I really struggled. Now apparently there are like Teflon mats that you can get that sit on that base plate of your machine and help sort of the fabric glide and move around a bit more easily. I don't have one of those. I don't even know where to buy them, probably Amazon. But I experienced how difficult it was with this flannel. So I'm hoping that when I start quilting my actual quilt, which has a lovely cotton backing, it's going to be much easier to move the fabric around. So before I tackle that, I'm going to do 2 more practice runs and I'll bring you along with me and show you those. They are these. I've just whipped these up out of fabric scraps that I had and I'm going to turn them into cushion covers to give to my parents. So I got 2, I've made them both the same and I've already got some green thread in my machine and I'm going to practice. Now on the other yellow scrappy piece, I did a meander sort of squiggly design and I think perhaps I started too ambitiously and that was a little bit difficult. So for these ones, I'm just going to stick with some sort of bigger waves to practice getting my hand and foot pedal and movement sort of coordination into a bit more of a rhythm. Because when I did this, I really struggled and was very jittery and jolty and couldn't get that flow correct because it's almost like, feels a bit like patting your head and rubbing your belly. You're sort of moving the fabric around, the needle stays still. You have to regulate the stitch length through your movement of your hands and the speed of the foot pedal. And I was all over the place. So we're gonna have a crack at it again. And I've also backed this just with this cotton, because you're not gonna see it, it will be on the inside of a cushion cover. I had this in my stash. I need to get rid of it. And it is just like a plain cotton with like a little star print on it. So this is a lot smoother. So I'm hoping that the movement will be a lot smoother, but let's give it a go together. I'm going to just increase the stitch length to 3. I'm also starting in the middle of this, let's just call it a block. I'm starting in the middle, but on the edge. So then I'm going to sort of come in and do a wavy line going down the middle. And I'm going to attempt to follow that on either side. Okay, so press the foot is down. And now you'll see with the press the foot down, I can still move this all around like it's not like a normal press the foot. Ooh. I've got this stuck. Oh, I'm nervous. I'm nervous, folks. Wavy lines. Oops. I can see why basting it would be a bit easier as a beginner because you've then got every piece of your quilt top like stuck to the wadding. Alrighty, that's my first line. Let's have a look. Okay, it's not too bad. Oh, not that great. See here where there was like a seam and I sort of like jilted a little bit, so it's not as smooth. And you can see here that my stitching line is not particularly smooth and my stitch length, my stitches aren't even. I think I might put my quilting gloves on just so that I can grip the fabric a little bit more easily and hope that that helps with that movement. I'm going to do that and then I'm going to finish quilting these wavy lines and I'll show you what this next test sample looks like. Oh, okay. That was surprisingly harder than the other one. I think because I was trying to do like slightly longer sort of, you know, like waves, and it was more difficult than doing the meander sort of looping around. I mean, I had more sort of sharp jittery turns in the meander version because I was trying to obviously figure out how on earth to match the movement of my hands with the speed from the presser foot. This was a little bit more difficult, although you can kind of see, this is the first line here. I don't know if you can sort of see how not great it is, but then I got a little bit better as I progressed. And look, with anything, practice. I have to keep practicing, and that's why I'm doing this, because I really want to get good at free motion quilting, and because I think it's really, really fun, and as difficult as it is. Things that are worth pursuing are often harder than things that maybe are less worth pursuing. Some words of wisdom. Now this is the back, and you can see those wavy lines on the back. It's probably harder to see because, but yeah, they're not, oh, that's terrible. It's very difficult, folks. This is only my second crack, and yes. The other thing as well, see here I had a bit of a knotting of the bobbin thread. Now this is not going to be something that I want happening when I tackle the quilt. I need to figure out how to avoid that. Let's have a crack with the second one. So I'm going to do the same design again, but see if I can do it a bit better. And yes, that way they'll still somewhat match, even though one will look, I mean, one may potentially look worse than the other, but we will see. I might not improve that quickly, folks. Let's do it. That was a little bit better, slightly more even. Sort of see a little bit better on the back. Yes, I did a much better job. Still not great. I think it's actually easier to do a closer together, sort of more of a curvy pattern, which sounds like it would actually be harder, but yeah, maybe it's because it's more noticeable on a sort of bendy, sort of slightly straighter line, like this very, very big wave, when your stitch length is not even. That's okay. I'm still impressed with that. I think I'm ready to have a crack at the big quilt. I'm scared, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I'm a little bit scared, and I'm also regretting that I didn't do this quilt as like a quilt as you go, considering that I want a free motion quilt. I think if it was smaller pieces, kind of like what I've done here, then it would have been easier for me to practice on. But you know what? Let's just give it a red hot go, because we can only get better. I don't think we can get any worse. Here we go. Now I'm not starting off of the edge on this one because the border that I added is quite distinct. So I'm thinking I'll do a different design on the border to the main sort of centerpiece. Okay. Oh, I need the gloves. Here we go. Gloves on. Concentration face. And this is hard. Oh my. Okay. I'm going for like a stepped pattern, so then my like curvy edges aren't. Oh my god, why is this so hard to move? This is so incredibly difficult for some reason, and I just don't know why. Okay, I am like a couple of inches in with like this sort of stepped pattern that I'm trying to do, and it's really hard to move. Like I've got like a sort of very nice cotton on the back of this, and I don't know whether it's because it's heavier, maybe I'll just go slow. Yeah, it's a lot harder to move. This design though is much easier to like figure out in my mind, because it doesn't have so many curved edges. So that's why I opted for this. I was going to do like a wavy pattern, but decided against that. That was stressful. And the whole time I was like this and incredibly tense. It was really hard because I think because of the weight of the quilt. I don't know if any of you are watching this and you're more experienced than me, so anyone who's not a complete beginner, any ideas why that was so, like, the resistance to like move it around, it was really, really difficult, much more difficult than the smaller pillowcase cover tops that I did earlier. I also did get, despite holding the threads at the start, a bit of a thread spider web, which, anyway, looking at the back, which I actually kept in white thread because I didn't want it to be like hugely noticeable just in case it was terrible. It's actually not too bad. I mean, considering this is my first like proper go on a full-size quilt. Looking at the front, yeah, I think I'm okay with it. I'm glad I picked that stepped design. And obviously this is a scrappy quilt. So like, I don't think it needs to be perfect. I think it's going to get easier the closer to the quilt edges that I get, because I'll have less fabric in the throat of the machine, which is going to make it a little bit easier to move it around, I think. Well, I guess I will just keep going. And I'm going to need a cup of tea, I think, to tackle this. Wish me luck. I have done half of the quilt. I had to have a break midway because my arm was getting really, really, really sore. I think because I'm like, oh, look at that. How cool is that? Like, it's not perfect, obviously, but I'm really, really happy with how it's looking. And I'm glad I picked this design because it actually blends really well with the piecing on the quilt top. Like I said earlier, I think with something like this, practice is what will help you get better. And particularly when it comes to free motion quilting, I think that muscle memory and the connection between your hands and the presser foot and your brain is like incredibly important, and definitely something that requires some practice. So I'm going to finish this quilt. I'll show you what it looks like when it's completely done. But I will say for now, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comments, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I really, really appreciate it. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.